Hello and welcome back to Everard Junction. Since the previous layout build video I have made quite a bit of progress. I'm basically working my way around this curve to try and get to the station. The station is an area that I've been longing to build for a long time now, and I think I'm just going to have to bite the bullet and get on with it. So most of the scenery work has been focused in moving in this direction to get around to the station over the past few months. So in today's video I'm going to continue working on the scenery to the left of the camera that I have started in the station area, and I'm also going to be coming back over to where we are now and adding a few details and just continuing to sort of build the area up. There's still an awful lot to do. I wouldn't say that any scenic part of the layout at the moment is actually finished. There's all sorts of details and bits and pieces to add. Even the area before you is only probably about 60% complete. So if we start over on the reversing siding, I have added a few more scenic effects and bits of paintwork just to make the end of the siding look a little bit better. It's not finished yet, but I'm quite happy with how it's coming along. Just needs a little bit more work. I saw on my recent trip up to Scotland there's a siding similar to this on the exit, I think it's on the exit to Peterborough heading north. And there was a siding very much like that, and it had all sorts of greenery and buddleia and plants and stuff growing at the end of the siding, and I was quite surprised how much nature had taken hold, considering it's in the middle of one of the busiest main lines in the country, but nonetheless it had. So some more greenery I think is needed in this area. Moving on from here, I have made a few more changes, and you can see the addition of the cable trunking along the side of the branch line here, and I've added various details, including making sure most of the lids have fallen off and adding the cable detail inside. The cable trunking is a scale model scenery kit that you've seen me use before. You can see the addition of a random disused speed limit sign there, and I've also added some static grass and subtle weathering effects. But being able to take the lids off and sort of put the cable trunking in this very much disorganised, messy state just makes it look very interesting and adds a real bit of depth to the side of the branch. I've also added some coping stones to the tops of the retaining wall. These were all left over from making the windows for the office building. Down on the wall itself I've started the process of adding the graffiti, a very important detail for an urban environment like this, especially one that was set during the 1980s. These graffiti transfers are made by Railtech, and they're basically tags, so they're quite small, but they're very effective, and I would certainly struggle to do something like that by hand. You can also see that I've started to add litter and junk. We have newspapers, crisp packets, pallets, timber and old bicycles. Most of these bits and pieces come from scale model scenery, with the tyres and the pallets coming from ready-to-run items from Bachmann and Oxford Diecast. And when you get close enough, the newspapers and the crisp packets are actually legible. This is another scale model scenery item, and although they're absolutely tiny and quite fiddly to apply, they certainly really add that bit of interest to this area. It just looks uncared for and dirty. And then if you add a few other bits and pieces, you can really bring the area to life and create that run-down urban environment. As we move further up the street, we can see the beginnings of a scene that was suggested by a couple of people in the previous video, and there you have it, a burnt out Mark I Golf. Very unfortunate for the Mark I Golf, probably quite a decent car before that happened to it, but again, it just adds to that urban, run-down appearance of this end of town that I'm trying to portray. I shall be adding some more detail to this area. As you can see, I've just basically done the ground. I've airbrushed it and sort of distressed it from the heat and the flames of the fire when this car was being burnt out. But perhaps we'll have perhaps a policeman or something investigating the scene. Could have him parked up on the pavement over here perhaps. Further down the street I've added some fencing. This is another scale model scenery kit, and I've just adapted and fiddled with it a little bit to make it look distressed and run down, so you can see some of the planks either missing or damaged, and it just complements the scene that I'm trying to do. So there's still quite a bit to do in this area, but it's certainly starting to come to life. Those little details have really made a sort of big improvement to the area. There's lots of shrubbery and perhaps trees and greenery to add, and I'm also considering adding in a fence, something like that, to the top of the retaining wall, and just adds that little bit of interest. You can see through the fence, so it's not going to obstruct the viewing of the trains, but it's just another piece of detail that you can add to enhance the area. Here at the office building, on the exterior, not very much has changed, but I have started to work on the interior. So this is the beginnings of the interior for the office building. This is one side of the office building, and basically what I've done is I've made a cardboard framework that matches the profile and shape of the building that fits inside, and this will enable me to hold the various rooms and interior details that I wish to add. I've completed one of the office areas on the first floor, so let's get that out and take a look at it. So you can see we've got some desks and some computer terminals, and indeed newspapers, and they are all legible, which is a very nice feature. And as we move around the office, we've got other features such as filing cabinets and different units and tables and bits and pieces. We've also got the typical carpet tiled floor, and where the painting is concerned, I've not gone too crazy. A lot of it's very difficult to see anyway, and what I'm trying to do is, this is a small business. It's perhaps been in operation for a number of years. Perhaps it's not doing so well these days, so you can see the desks and everything. It all just looks a little bit sort of run down, a little bit used, trying to sort of complement the area that this is fundamentally going in, the not so nice end of town near the railway station. So inside the framework, what I've basically done is created some runners which allow me to install the various modules. It means I can build the module much more easily at my desk and then add them to the building later on. So you can see we're not finished yet. The computer shop seems to be boarded up at the moment, but there's the interior detail, and obviously with the addition of some lighting that will really come to life. But even so, just being able to see some of the desks and some of the office furniture and figures through those windows just makes the building look considerably more interesting than, say, that just there. So I will be continuing to add to the building and give it that sort of lived-in appearance. We'll be adding toilets, a canteen, more office space, perhaps a manager's office, things like that. And then we've got to work on the shops on the ground floor. So that covers all of the bits and pieces that I've been working on up in this area. So let's turn our attention to the station area and move down the street and see what's going on. So as we move down, I've purchased some of the L-Cut Creative retaining wall kits. Some of those include some shops as well, as you can see. Nice little kit, relatively easy to put together, and I've done the usual painting and weathering. I thought some retaining walls with some businesses underneath them would look particularly good, and it's nice just to change up the design of the retaining wall. I think it would have been a bit dull if I'd just continued the retaining wall that we have further up over there. It would have all looked a little bit samey. So here we have something different, and I've also changed the colour as well. I tried to portray London brick. I've used Vauxhall Station as some inspiration for this, Vauxhall Station in London, and you can see we've got some nice streaking effects there, and it's sort of painted in that sort of limestone sort of colour that you sometimes see the London brick in. I will of course be adding interiors to the shops when the time comes, thinking this could be perhaps a blockbuster. That's why I've painted it in those colours. And then some of the walls are blocked off, and then some more of them have got businesses in, and then we've got a small warehouse or industrial unit in between that one. I tried to make things look a little bit different. On the street itself, we finally have a decent bus stop, so I've got somewhere to park my Leyland National and Leyland Titan, and there's also room then for the Magna Rail system to work and for the cars to drive past. Over at the far end we have a bridge, typical to the type that you would see in numerous urban places around the country. That's also made by L-Cut Creative, and I've modified it slightly and incorporated it into the retaining wall that they offer. This large space here will house the station building, which I will be building from scratch. Hope to have quite a nice, interesting building for that area. And then, again, just to change things up a little bit, not try and be the same everywhere on the layout, we actually have some paving slabs here instead of my usual affair with using fillers to create a tarmac pavement. We've now got paving slabs instead. These are made by Scale Model Scenery. And we also have the addition of the Scale Model Scenery curbstones to complement the pavement and give us a proper street scene. Further up the streets we have another one of those iron bridges, which I've incorporated into my scratch-built retaining wall, which then continues behind the office building and around the curve. So that brings you up to speed with where we're at the moment. I wanted to get all this sort of work done before I made another video. I was conscious that we were sort of lingering over on that top corner, so I've done quite a lot of the base sort of groundwork in this area, and we're now ready to add details and get the paint out and really start to bring this area to life. I've staggered the pavement at this end, as you can see, and the traffic also staggers in the opposite direction. The intention for this area was always to have this junction being 2 lanes, this one for turning left, this one for turning right. What I'm going to do is close this road with some cones. We'll have some essential maintenance, laying a new gas main or something, which then gives me justification for the reason why everybody seems to be turning right and nobody's turning left. Obviously nobody's turning left because they'll fall off the layout, but for the sake of realism on the model, no one's going to be turning left because we'll have this coned off, the road will be closed. We'll have a similar thing up at the junction at the other end of the layout. The idea is off-scene, this road goes around behind the camera and joins onto the T-junction where the terraced houses are. The idea in my head is then that road is shut for waterworks, gasworks, whatever it might be, and that is why all of the vehicles are taking the same route. Okay, first thing I'm going to do is get the paint and the airbrush out. We'll get the road painted, get the pavement painted, and that will really lift this area. Also need to get that bridge finished up by the office building. Okay, there we go. It was quite a lot of airbrushing, but quite pleased with the results. I've been using the Vallejo paints, as I tend to use quite a lot. They're water-based, so it's nice and safe. Don't really want to be doing extended airbrushing up here with oil-based paints. It took me a while to find a colour that I was happy with for the paving, but we've settled on a sort of grey with a hint of brown. Quite pleased with that. And you can see all the little bits and imperfections in the road really add to the way it looks. If that was all just completely smooth and perfect, it would not really look like a real road. It's a bit plain and dull at the moment, so now it's time to add further details, things like road markings and such. Bit of weathering. Should look a lot better. There we have the wall loosely refitted. As you can see, I've cut the paving into the base of the wall so that it looks like the wall has a proper foundation. It's not just plonked on top of the pavement. So there we have the first few road markings. You can see how much it just lifts the area up. There's enough room in there for 2 buses, so I can chop and change the scene as and when I feel like it. All these markings are self-adhesive, and you can get those from Scale Model Scenery. So there we have the completed road markings. I shall add a couple of double yellows as well, just to add a bit more interest. They're quite easy to apply. They just stick straight down, but obviously you need to be careful to make sure you put the pieces in the right places. Okay, so I've made a bit more progress, as you can see. We've stuck down the rest of those road markings. It does take a while to do those, but certainly a lot easier than painting them. And I've gone over the top of them with an airbrush just to tone things down. They were quite bright and garish, which is fine for a freshly laid road, but obviously this one's got a few years under its belt, so the markings will have certainly lost a bit of their sheen. Over here I've completed this small T-junction. I've just finished off doing the pavement going around the corner of the office building, and then you can see the Celotex foam sits a little bit higher, so we'll have some brick around there to bed into the foundations of the building, and it just creates that little bit of interest, having the building on the flat and a slight slope in the pavement as we come down to this junction here. I've made some more progress on this bridge, and obviously the road does need to continue underneath there. The plywood isn't exactly very attractive, but that's a job for another time. So I'm quite pleased so far with the results. I mean, obviously it's just the basics, you know, that we're missing all of the signs and street lamps and things like that, but the bare bones are in. It certainly looks a lot better than the bare plywood, but I am just going to make sure that the road still works. There's no reason why it shouldn't. One of the reasons why I've been airbrushing everything is so I get a nice sort of light coat of paint over all of the surfaces on the road. If I was to brush paint it, I'd probably oversaturate the paper and perhaps cause a few wrinkles and problems with the running of the cars. So we've got a Volvo over there. Hopefully it still works and can make it over to me. Okay, well, I'm pleased that that is still working. It was a lot of work to install the Magna Rail. It's quite a fiddly system, but certainly once it's in place, it seems to be quite reliable. I get the odd problem here and there, especially with the heavier vehicles. At the end of the day, I'm using die-cast vehicles. The bodies of the cars are made of metal, so they are quite heavy. The system is really more catered for much lighter plastic vehicles, but I just about get away with it. Okay, there's a fair bit of glue and paint and various bits and pieces drying off, so I'm going to move on to a couple of little bits and pieces of detail back further over on this side. But just quickly, I'll just show you how I've achieved the weathered streaking effect on the brickwork for the retaining walls. You can see these pillars look far too clean. So as you can see, I have masked up the area of pavement around the base of the support for the bridge, so now we can tone down the concrete effect and give it some sort of weathered finish. Looks a little bit similar, or if not the same, as the wall that's next to it. I shall be using a combination of 3 different Vallejo colours to achieve this. We have German grey, German black and brown, and then just black. I find these in various amounts really give a nice effect to the walling. So first thing to do is to spray a mix of these colours over the wall. Going to be quite aggressive, quite heavy with it, and then we will remove some of that to create this sort of weather-beaten, streaky effect that we can see on the wall to the left. On its own, that looks terrible. So now what we need to do is to remove some of that to actually create the weathering effect we're after. To do that, I shall be using a cotton bud, or an earbud, or a Q-tip, depending on where you live, and isopropyl alcohol, in this case almost 100% pure. This will remove the acrylic paint. We need to be careful so that we don't remove the concrete finish underneath, but it will remove the paint, and we can keep going until we reach the weathering effect that we're after. Some kitchen roll is also very useful. That's basically how you do it. I'll leave that to dry and see how well it blends into the rest of the wall. I'm happy for it to look a little bit different, as it is a bridge support, so it is a different bit of structure, so some different weathering will certainly add to the area. So there we have it. Simple, but effective. Continuing with some detail work, I've added a little bit more graffiti over onto the wall. This is done by Scale Model Scenery as well. And as you can see, it's quite a bit more effective than anything I could do with a paintbrush. All of the pieces have a railway theme. I've just started adding those along this section of wall. It would have had plenty of graffiti on it. Easy to get to, there's no fence, wouldn't take long. So now I'm going to add a little bit in the car park just to continue the theme. Again, the car park is not secure. It will be very easy to get in there with a rattle can and have some fun on the wall. Okay, I'm quite happy with that, but it is certainly missing a few trees and bushes. That's the car park looking suitably vandalised.
The large pieces of graffiti are from Scale Model Scenery, and then these much smaller tags are from Railtech. The tags are very useful. They break up the large pieces of graffiti and give it that sort of realistic appearance. Not everybody will put a massive word on the side of the wall. Most will just quickly squiggle something and leg it. I'll add a few bits of Woodland Scenic's fine leaf foliage and see how it looks. May come back and revisit that, but for the time being, a few shrubs and small trees I think should certainly lift the area up a little bit. Okay, so there's a few trees added. None of those are glued down yet. I may change the position or change the type of trees, but for the time being, that's broken things up a little bit, and nature has taken hold slightly in this area. Well, that seems like a logical place to pause for the time being, and I will leave it there until the next video. As you can see, I've added a few more details. You can see some bikes and some of the fencing I mentioned briefly at the beginning of the video. That's appeared on the top of the retaining wall. Once again, there are also products from Scale Model Scenery. We'll just mention briefly at this point that despite all of the products from Scale Model Scenery and various other companies in this video, none of this is sponsored, none of this has been sent to me for free. I'm building my layout and I have bought these items for my layout. If I ever get sent something for free or I'm asked to promote something, I will obviously make it clear in the beginning of the video. So there you go. As you can see, the Magna Rail is running quite happily. As I've said, I do have to be careful with my selection of vehicles. Some work a lot better than others, but it really is nice having vehicles trundling up and down the road whilst you're running trains. So the next video will most likely focus on the interior for the office building. I've still got quite a bit of work to do on that structure, and it can certainly make a video in its own right, so that will probably be the next one. And I've also got a number of other small projects and structures that I've started for various other areas of the layout, including the station itself. So excited to get cracking, and we'll see how much progress I make, and I will be back as soon as I can when sufficient progress has been made. So there you go. Hope you enjoyed the video. Thank you very much for watching. As always, it does really help, keep the motivation going and keep me spurred on to crack on with the layout. I'll be back as soon as I can with the next one, but obviously building this thing really does take quite a lot of time. In the meantime, feel free to head over to Dean Park Station. Dave's really made quite a lot of progress with his TMD side of the layout.